All right, so we've completed the texturing process here in Substance Painter. And while it looks really awesome in our 3D view for this software, it'd be nice if we could bring out these textures so it could look really cool in other software as well. So let's take a look at exporting these textures. If I come on up to File and Export Textures here, it's going to open up this export dialog. Now I'm going to skip this section for now and let's go to Output Templates. And here is where we're going to define our export template. So the way that Substance Painter works is that we create these templates or presets to define which textures we want to target on export and how we actually want to package those all together. So if we scroll on down to the PBR metallic roughness, right, that is the template that we initialized this project with. We can see all of the textures that would export if we were to use that template. So we've got the base color, roughness, metallic, normal, height, and emissive. That's a pretty standard way to export your textures. Again, they're all individual images that we would be exporting. However, for this project, it wouldn't work exactly like how we'd want it because we don't have an emissive texture, so I wouldn't want to even export this channel. We also don't really need to use the height for this model because, again, that height information that we're generating is being converted into a normal map. And I'd also want to combine our roughness and metallic actually into one image using a technique known as texture packing. So in this instance, we're going to go and create our own preset. So up in the top left, let's click on the little plus. And I'll double click on this and call it Tread Export. Sweet, so we've created the preset, but now we need to actually provide it with some content. So up in this middle panel here is where we're going to create those individual texture outputs. And the way that we start that is by determining which type of color space it's in. So the first one we're going to do is going to be our base color, and that's going to be an RGB image. We're not going to be using any alpha for this image, so again, you can just rule out these two here. But the reason I'm using RGB over R plus G plus B is that this separates it into individual channels, and we can go and actually slot in specific texture images into the individual channels. Now they need to be grayscale images, so that's going to be useful when we want to package together our metallic, roughness, and ambient occlusion. But because we're just using a simple color image and we want to display, the combination of those colors at the end of the day, we're going to use an RGB. So let's go and call this tire albedo. And now we need to determine which one of these texture slots actually gets slotted into the RGB here. So let's go on over to base color, and I'm going to drag and drop that. And we're going to, again, just select the RGB channel. We don't want to select an individual channel. And now you can see that we have that color association, right? We've got that purple to that purple there. And we can even change the file type and the bit depth as well. But I'm just going to leave that at default. I think a PNG with 8 bits is good enough. Now the next image we're going to create is also going to be RGB, and this is going to be our normal map. So let's call this tire, and instead of calling it normal, I'm actually going to call it DirectX. And the reason that we're going to call it DirectX is I'm also going to do tire underscore OpenGL. Because Blender and Unreal Engine use different normal map formats, and you'll find this is the case with all software, they just decide that they're going to use, one of the two. It becomes very frustrating sometimes when you're trying to navigate through software and they all use different formats, but that is the reality we live in, unfortunately. So I'm going to export a normal map for both of the formats because we are going to be touching both Blender and Unreal throughout this project when we need a normal map. So now we can go and plug in those normal formats into both of these images here. I'm going to come down to converted maps and normal DirectX for our DirectX and normal OpenGL. And now finally, I'm going to use an R plus G plus B output map. And we can see it's actually split it up into those individual channels. for our kind of like texture packed image that's going to store 3 different texture outputs. Let's just call this tire underscore RMA. And the RMA is just a general working convention. It stands for roughness, metallic, ambient occlusion. It just kind of tells you which channel holds which type of information. So I can go and store the roughness into the R channel. And again, we're going to select gray because each one of these image channels is essentially just a grayscale image that holds color intensity. So that's why we're going to be able to work with this texture packing technique, specifically only for grayscale images, because at the end of the day, RGB images are just a combination of 3 grayscale images all packed together. We'll go and select our metallic for the G channel, and we'll also select our ambient occlusion. Now this one is a little bit confusing, and I always struggle with which ambient occlusion to pick, whether it's from our mesh map, from our input map, or from the converted map. We're going to take the converted map one because we've been working with ambient occlusion and actually adding it to our texture set as we've been working along our project here in Substance Painter. So mixed AO is just going to kind of take all of your ambient occlusion inputs from all different areas, be it your mesh map or from the actual layers of your project here, and combine them all together. So that's why we're going to select mixed AO, and we'll put that in the blue channel. So now that we have our template set up, we can head back to settings. The first thing we'll want to do is select a directory output here. And then we'll go and select our tread export. This is the template we've just created. And here we can set global settings for all of the textures that we're going to export. So again, PNG, 8 bits. We can change the size of this depending on if we want to export 4K or 8K. I'm going to stick with 2K, which was the texture set size we set when we started the project. And I would generally leave the dilation on infinite just so that it's going to give you the best possible padding for your textures. However, if we did have multiple materials or texture sets for this model, you can see here we can actually select each individual material slot. Now, because we only have one, we're going to be able to select one, but if you had more, they would start to populate in a list down here. And here's where we can start to select if we only wanted to export the albedo and the OpenGL for this material, we could do that here. You can also change the file format and the bit depth as well. So you do have some ability to kind of change which textures are getting exported and how they're getting exported. But first you need to create an actual template for this to use for us to have this ability. So I'm just going to stick with the global settings that we have here and then go and select export. And then once we've exported that, we can just take a look at our output directory here. And if we take a look, we've got our tire albedo, DirectX, OpenGL, and our kind of cool looking roughness metallic AO map.